Okay, so first we'd like to acknowledge that we're on unceded coastal territory today, and we're grateful to be here. And the question that we'd like to put, as just described, is that social support groups have been around for quite a long time now, and we're in quite a different environment than we were in 1992 or 1979. So are they still a effective intervention in queer men's health? So, spoiler alert, we don't have a definite answer for you, although we do have some opinions. But to tell you a little bit about methodology, we had a pretty limited time to develop a presentation in between being approved to do so and sitting here right now. So we want to acknowledge that there's definitely capacity to drill deeper into the question. But what we did was we surveyed and interviewed a range of group participants, facilitators, and staff coordinators associated with groups that community runs. And we've got a few examples of them up here of groups that currently run or have recently run at community which serve queer men.
And the kind of clear conclusion we reached is that groups certainly, definitely have exceeding relevance still in a lot of different areas. And they're certainly not the only medium through which these kind of positives can be attained, but in terms of being a site of information and social connection, as well as just being exposed to a diverse range of ideas and experiences, and these things all kind of contribute to positive health in many different facets. Participants often we offer a space where they can speak and be heard through these groups. And this in turn can kind of increase confidence, but also it plays a really crucial role in helping to validate people's identities as gay or queer men, and really gives them a sense of self-worth by being involved and actively participating in these groups. We also hear from some participants, seniors for instance, that it's a reason to leave the house, and sometimes it might be the only reason in a given day to leave the house. So that's something as basic as that is great. As well, people who attend on a regular basis or continue to attend for a while, often there's a diminishing amount of oppressive thought or at least oppressive things said, which is certainly a marker of progress in a sense. And then also just really fundamentally, it's a form of intellectual stimulation for people. Groups also offer a means of engaging with trusted figures within the community, whether those be facilitators, speakers, and just fellow participants, peers. Especially with expert speakers, groups offer a way of getting information from experts that is not always easy to access. For financial or social reasons, for instance. And another reason, or another thing we see as kind of a marker of progress from these groups, or a certain marker of relevance, continued relevance, is that people that participate often move into leadership roles within groups, or just contribute more, or they start facilitating other groups, or they just gain kind of prominence within the community in other places as leaders. Certainly, groups are more relevant for certain cohorts than others. So especially for men who might be socially disconnected, that these groups can really provide a means of socializing and accessing information that might not otherwise be there. Particularly seniors, youth, men who are maybe still closeted. Those are some cohorts that really might benefit from our groups, from the programs we offer. Certainly, these groups can be really empowering for people, and can also provide a means of kind of composing one's own chosen family and support network. It's a means to meet new people and provide a means of support for oneself. Certainly, we wouldn't say that groups are the be-all, end-all of social interaction or anything like that, and they're not an alternative so much to other social settings, such as online bars, sports. It's not really a dichotomy. It's rather a complementing set of, like a whole. And really, we see our groups as, or group work in general, as a springboard into further participation in other social environments, and vice versa. We really see that because people move on from our groups, and they move into other social settings once they've got what they needed. It's hard to determine what that is sometimes. Sometimes we take that as a negative, but really, we can definitely see it as a marker of progress as well. That being said, there are a few things about groups that make them a little bit unique as a social setting. As kind of already mentioned, groups or social settings in general have the tendency to marginalize certain groups, including seniors and diversely abled folk, and they're not always very accessible to various people. So we hope to fill a void sometimes for certain cohorts. And likewise, as important as the internet is, nothing can really make up for face-to-face engagement. It's crucial to health in all its facets. We also see that technology can sometimes, we fall into these traps where we talk about, stats and sex, instead of actually sometimes engaging with each other as human beings. So face-to-face interactions in groups, for instance, are absolutely essential. It's a way of kind of engaging without that constant sexual and social capital hanging over your head. Also, we offer a space that's supposed to be safe. That's at least a safer space, which really frees people up to share in a way that they might not in other environments. This allows us to dig deeper into health topics and relationship topics than we would probably be able to get into at like a bar. So ultimately, we see that there's certainly value in these groups. We hear that from participants. We have groups that people always attend. But at the same time, there are challenges, and we have other groups where we really struggle to get even a few people out. And that really makes us, question, is this really a relevant thing?
So in the age of Google, what role do groups play in connecting participants with information? Well, at least at Community, there's kind of a wide spectrum of how this happens. We've got really informational focus groups like Men on Men, where there's a year-long curriculum of diverse topics ranging from HIV disclosure to sexual health to legal matters to relationship issues, to groups where information is kind of a byproduct to things that are kind of a different mandate of the group, such as a bereavement group or a book club, for example. So one thing that groups have the capacity to provide is access to expert human guest speakers who can really interact with questions and unique context of the participants in a way that a website or a frequently asked questions just cannot. It also means, as Ben touched on before, that participants have access to figures that they might not have access to otherwise, such as legal professionals who they may never have the financial means to access, or authority figures on the issue of HIV disclosure, which they may not know where to access otherwise. Community groups can also provide referrals and information on what's out there in the community. No one gets along with their gay card a directory of every single resource that may be useful to you. And there's a particular value to getting information from trusted sources who you can have a relationship with, and also a boost to information retention, which comes from actually discussing topics. As well as receiving information, groups are a great place to share information, both sort of hard fact kind of information and also lived experience. So groups are a great facilitator of oral tradition and lived archives, as well as intergenerational knowledge and skill sharing. So that may look like sharing that lived experience, or possibly sharing technological skills to be able to access things like online dating, which may have hitherto been inaccessible otherwise. And of course, the cognitive aspect of exposure to different perspectives and ways of processing information really facilitates critical thought in a way that the internet may or may not do. So a couple of other things to acknowledge are that not everybody is online. That's definitely an area of privilege, and not everybody reads, so groups definitely circumnavigate that. And not everyone actively seeks new information, which is where that byproduct aspect of some of their groups come in. Groups present a confidentiality challenge in some ways, but they can also surmount some other confidentiality changes. So there's no browser history when you go to a group, and there's no one walking past the computer in the library.
So in addition to information access, groups also provide a means of social access, as has already kind of been mentioned somewhat. Social health is, of course, exceedingly important, but there are often a lot of barriers involved in getting to that. We've also seen a lot of kind of social spaces, like face-to-face spaces, that have become less important over time, such as bars, with the rise of technology and the internet and texting and all that. But there's still there's a fundamental problem that technology and bars and a lot of these environments require money. That's a very prominent class barrier, for instance. So groups provide a means of producing friendships, mentorships, that can really turn into major support networks for people. Sexual pressure is not really nearly as present in these groups. If you're looking to hook up, there are probably better places to go than a community group, though I'm sure that goes on somewhat as well. Instead, we kind of try to focus on trust and sharing and kind of creating a community where people feel really comfortable to share their experiences. And this, I think, really produces a sense of resilience for people. It's not an individual thing in a vacuum. It's a community. And again, it's that kind of opportunity to make a family for yourself out of who you choose. And we definitely see this when participants, for instance, comment on absences of fellow participants, and really clearly miss when people are not there. So we start to see this alternative to the biological family emerging in groups. This whole idea of a chosen family, and in turn, this kind of chosen family can allow for skill sharing and teaching from in all aspects of life, from tech skills to queer history, lived experience. And definitely our groups are more of they don't exist in a vacuum. They're a springboard to other socialization. So people often will, hang out beforehand or afterwards, and that's great. We love to see that. However, we also see cliques forming, and it's very difficult to avoid. Regulars, for instance, tend to group together somewhat. But successful facilitation can kind of minimize the prevalence of cliques. And we also just have to be realistic about our expectations. Not everybody's going to walk away from our groups with a whole network of friends.
So groups, we definitely think, are a potential piece in positive health outcomes for queer men, but definitely not a panacea though. So one way that we see this positive outcome is that participants frequently check in reporting a bad day or a week and check out reporting feeling good, which I think really speaks for itself. Groups can be a positive experiences which counterbalances some of the negative experiences they might be having. It can be a place to simply have fun, to laugh, or to get things off the chest. So some of the value in terms of, like we mentioned before, the affirmation of self-identity and worth really work against the minority stress associated with internalized homophobia. And many of us in this room don't lack for opportunities to talk about our lived experiences as queer men. But I'm sure that we can... all of us who might feel that way can remember a time when it was such a relief just to have that opportunity, when that was a really scarce thing. And for many of our participants, this is what they report. They say, I just don't have anywhere else where I can talk about these things. So some of our groups are specifically, ostensibly health focused, such as Gen Yoga or Chronically Queer, or do provide didactic information or opportunities to discuss health issues. And all of our groups, of course, have the ability to connect participants to health resources elsewhere in the community, as well as being a potential sounding board, say, for example, on the nuances of sexual health from trusted facilitators and peers. And can simply be part of a healthy routine. Talked about, getting out of the house, a source of ways to connect for social health outside of possibly a substance use-centered venue.
Groups are also a means of engaging with diversity on a level that we might not otherwise just organically occur. It encourages participants to step outside of their comfort zones and engage with people from a variety of backgrounds and perspectives. Certainly our groups are very diverse. There's several kind of examples of that, diversity in terms of age or ethnicity or culture or gender. They're all really important, but what they really produce when you engage with those things is more competency and more acceptance of difference. And additionally, if we can set groups up to encourage this, we also see self-advocacy where participants don't just let the facilitators educate participants. They educate each other about their own diversity. So it kind of becomes this thing where a lot of the power is actually in the participants' hands, for sure. But we still have a role to play in making sure that the curriculum is as diverse and as reflective as the queer community as we can. Nonetheless, we don't really have any control over how people take that information. Some people receive it very openly. Others are a little bit more resistant, and certainly we also have some participants who kind of walk away from it without really gaining anything from it. But mostly, definitely the prevailing feeling is that it's a positive interaction.
So if numbers are an issue, which they certainly are for many community groups, who's coming and who's not coming? So people that we tend to see include guys who are out, guys who are gay identified, looking for something other than sex, anticipate their needs being met from how the group's been promoted to them, and possibly have had positive previous experiences with groups. So who's missing from this empty chair in the middle of the picture here? Well, we definitely see a trough in terms of guys in the 25 to 40 age cohort for a variety of reasons, possibly including other life events, less of a focus possibly at a population level on coming out, for example. Guys who are worried about being outed by walking into a building like communities, possibly, or by the possibility of seeing someone they know in the participant group even. Embarrassment about talking about issues like kink or risk face-to-face. So good facilitation can help with this, of course, but not if people don't come. And it's important to acknowledge that there is a stigma for many people in the idea of accessing a group, whether it be a support group or even a social group or recreational group. So for some guys, that doesn't gel with their self-concept or the self-concept that they're striving for, so we definitely don't see those guys. And we definitely hear the story that participants come, they don't see themselves represented, and they don't come back. So I didn't see anyone of my age, I didn't see anyone of my cultural background, I didn't see anybody who represents my abilities, and then someone in that same demographic is there the next session, and then the next session. So if we could all get them into the same room, that would be great, but people are determined to stagger their attendance. So that's definitely a challenge that we face. Also, we don't see the guys who aren't already engaged with organisations. It's very hard to get word out to them, or who feel negatively about a particular organisation, of course. And men who feel alienated from the gay community. And sometimes this can be an actual facilitator of attendance, if they perceive that a community will happen differently in a group setting, but for many, they're just done. And as we said before, accessibility is a big issue, whether it's the accessibility for physical space or where it's located. Can people get back safely by public transit, depending to a different geographical area, depending on what time the group's held at? Do we provide food for people? a whole range of things. Accessibility is, as you all know, very complex. And classism is a huge barrier, as Ben mentioned before. If there's a particular level of education needed to engage in the dialogue that's happening at groups, that excludes a huge range of people. We don't see a whole lot of couples. We don't see returns from people who come when it's a slow night or when the speaker bombs. And there's a question of whether groups really facilitate or exclude, or possibly both. Introverts, shy guys. You could argue that groups, by definition, are going to be off-putting to people who don't enjoy being in groups, but they can also provide a space where that's more feasible than, say, going to a bar or, hanging out with a larger group of friends. Perception of what the group is and what it offers, and the fact that you can't please everybody. Not every structure or ethos is going to work for everybody in the community. So we're going to skip past this question a little bit, but if we've got some questions on how we can achieve intentional inclusiveness during the question period, that would be fantastic. But what can stretched organisations and overtaxed community leaders do to make groups a sustainable model? I think we feel pretty strongly that while there are a lot of challenges, groups are still a valuable model, but how can we actually do them in an effective way? The thing that we heard over and over again is participant ownership, so avoiding that top-down model, making sure that participants have a hand in making the decisions about the group. The volunteers are active in planning and management. If a organisation is involved in the group, that staff are involved in a hands-off kind of way, but are definitely, kinetically involved, are showing up periodically, particularly at the beginning. And that staff aren't taking on the responsibility to much of a large degree of problem solving when facilitators and participants may be in a position to do so. It's quite disempowering, and it overtaxes the organisation as well. Essentially, communication is the only thing that can make all these things happen. So there's a real time investment needed to make sure that there's no cracks of everyone assuming that someone else is going to do a really crucial thing for the group to be successful. Facilitators need to have an opportunity to be trained, hopefully to shadow previous facilitators and or to have access to mentor figures. So that's always sometimes difficult if the previous facilitators of a group have, not given a lot of notice. There may not be a huge amount of opportunity to do that. But trying to set facilitators up for success and continuing to support them with check-ins, making sure that there's more than one facilitator, so it's not always falling on the shoulders of one person. That's definitely going to lead to burnout. And it's supporting facilitators to take breaks if they need to. Checking in about workload and what other commitments they have going on, and making sure that they're facilitating, not leading. There's also an element to making sure that facilitators are well selected, that they've got a good range of facilitation skills, reliability, availability, and also being aware that in most cases facilitators are going to have lived experience, which is absolutely crucial and a huge asset, but can also mean that facilitators can be tempted into a participant role while they're facilitating, or can be triggered, or can be tempted to form dual relationships. So being really aware of that. At the same time, organisations really need to focus and invest in recognising their volunteers, which many of us know can be a huge struggle to find the time for, but is hugely important and isn't really covered by that one annual event that so many of us do. So really making that a priority. Looking to find ways that facilitators can share knowledge amongst themselves, possibly with a sort of a knowledge sharing event annually, quarterly, and encouraging facilitators to debrief after each session. Is a thing which is a habit which we can all fall out of really easily, but it's important not to underestimate as valuable. If you have speakers, again, a lot of this comes down to investment of time. Invest in the time in briefing them properly. There's nothing more painful for the speaker and the participants than a speaker who hasn't really been briefed on what the intention of them being there is for, and not really gelling with the intention of the group or the expectation of the participants. So invest time into needs assessment before and during. Why are we doing this? Should we be doing this? Be open to the idea that a group may reach its natural shelf life. Be aware that you may be reinventing the wheel. And be intentional about your actual needs. A great example of this is, do men need a coming out group, or do they need a group that will connect them to community? We often get people saying, I want a coming out group, but what turns out to be the case is that they are in fact mostly already out, but they're feeling a real disconnect from the community, and that's the aspect of coming out that they're looking to complete. So we're hearing, I need help coming out, but that's not what the actual need is. So I want to close by saying that, I guess, 2 takeaways. First, how do you measure success? I encourage anyone who's providing a group to really focus on thinking critically about this. Is success defined by a cohort within a group moving through to completion? Is it defined by a really niche service that isn't provided anywhere? Like, I would say that our bereavement group is a great example of that, with small numbers who get a lot out of the group. Or is it defined by high numbers? You know, so many of us have funders who love the numbers. How do we avoid falling into that trap of missing out on the smaller numbers who have that intense need versus possibly more of a generalized group that attracts more people? The other thing that I want to stress as a takeaway is definitely my experience has been that the biggest trap is not devoting enough time, which often comes from trying to do too much, trying to offer too many groups along with a range of other services. So really identifying your priorities and what you can realistically do, and not spreading yourself too thin. Thank you.